A brother's legacy. The vessel was as quiet as the grave. Aelius could sense the lingering feeling of abandonment that clung to the void ship's haunted corridors as he descended the ramp of his Thunderhawk. The Righteous Vengeance, a Dauntless-class light cruiser of the Imperial Navy, had suffered crippling damage in the recent battle. It had been boarded by the combat organisms of the Tyranids, and any crew unfortunate enough not to make it to the savior pods in time were consumed. Some of the alien invaders no doubt still remained on board. Even though the large hive ships that spawned them had been routed from the systems, they would be no less dangerous, like a wild predator backed into a corner. Aelius marched from the docking station and through the fractured corridors of the void ship, his steps clanging against the durasteel floor like a drumbeat, accompanied by the buzzing emergency lights. Smoke hung heavy in the air, a shroud that only partially concealed the heavy battle damage the ship had endured. Twisted conduits, ruptured bulkheads, and still-burning fires became increasingly common as he made his way deeper into the vessel's heart. The ship had no doubt been an exemplary example of the God Emperor's Imperial Navy, once, but now it was a drifting hulk. Despite its current wretched state, the machine spirit should be proud, Aelius thought. The ship had done its duty. To die in the Emperor's service was the greatest honor anyone could hope for. But then, perhaps this wasn't the end for the Righteous Vengeance. A valuable asset like a void craft would not willingly be abandoned. In time, reclamation teams would come to cleanse whatever Xenos filth remained, before restoring it to active service, if at all possible. If not, its valuable mechanical parts would be reclaimed, to give new life to other void ships that would continue to defend the Imperium in its stead. Aelius contemplated the symbolic significance of that as he strode on. He entered what must once have been one of the ship's bustling cafeterias. It had been where the crew had gathered to share meals and fleeting moments of rest from the hard labor of maintaining a vessel of such size. Now it lay in ruins. Chairs and tables were toppled and strewn about the room. There was evidence of fire damage in one corner, and chunks of what remained of crewmen were piled up in various places, now little more than mutilated flesh and tattered uniforms. As he surveyed the scene, various runes and sigils flared on the display inside his helmet. The wounds were consistent with talons and teeth marks, which, after inspection, suggested the crew had been feasted upon over a period of time. Aelius concluded that the cafeteria was now some kind of feeding ground for the Xenos invaders that were still aboard. At the back of the cafeteria was a large tapestry depicting the Emperor, on Terra, surrounded by his angels of death, a bulwark against all that would dare assail his most holy Imperium. Aelius ran his fingers across the decorative mural, soiled now by scorch marks and splatters of human blood. Suddenly, a new rune briefly flashed before quickly vanishing. It was what he had been searching for. With a vow of vengeance on his lips, he left the cafeteria in the direction of the locator beacon. Aelius moved cautiously through the twisted maze of corridors, his bolter at the ready. The air was thick with tension, and his warrior's intuition alerted him of the danger before he even heard the faint sound of skittering claws on metal. From the darkness ahead, a group of gene stealers sprang from a gaping tear in the bulkhead. The creatures were living nightmares spawned from the darkness between galaxies. A blasphemous fusion of insectoid and humanoid, each gene stealer had 4 arms that ended in either talons or claws that could tear through even Astartes' power armor. Despite their hunched backs, covered in chitinous plates and sinewy muscle, they were fast, and now they rushed towards Aelius. He opened fire, his bolter roaring to life. Explosive rounds tore through the air, and with each hit a stealer burst in a plume of gore and chitin. But the numbers of the Xenos seemed endless. Slowly they forced him back, step by step, as for everyone he felled, another took its place. With a clunk, his ammo clip ran dry. Even with his lightning reflexes, there wasn't enough time to reload. Instead, Aelius let go of his bolter and drew his combat knife. Half a heartbeat later, the first stealer reached him, lunging at him with a piercing talon. Aelius parried the strike with the back of one hand and brought his knife up under the chin of its elongated head with the other. Using its momentum, he twisted his body to send it hurtling behind him. He span back around to impale his knife up to the hilt in the neck of another, but it got stuck and the weapon was pulled from his grasp. A stealer pounced to land on top of Aelius, sending him toppling onto his back, one of its talons gouging through his power armor to carve deeply into his flesh underneath. As it clawed and scratched at him, Aelius reached up and twisted the stealer's head until there was a stomach-churning crack, and it dropped limp and dead. He lay there for a moment, staring into the lifeless face of the gene stealer crumpled across his chest. He was expecting to be pulled apart at any moment, but nothing happened. Aelius threw the Xenos off and sat upright. Thankfully, it had been the last of them, and now he sat as the lone survivor in a corridor filled with the dead. Warnings flared on the display in his helmet. He was losing a lot of blood. Aelius leant against the corridor wall and closed his eyes. Retreating into his memories, he was transported to a distant, long-ago battlefield. The sky was ablaze with the fiery trails of drop pods, and the air echoed with the roars of green skins. Aelius slid behind the rocky outcrop that Tiberius was using as cover. "You're late, brother," the older Astartes pointed out in a matter-of-fact tone. "Better late than never," Aelius joked. "Any later, and it would have been never," Tiberius replied. "I have every confidence in your abilities to deal with a few green skins," Aelius said. Tiberius snorted, tossing a grenade into a blast crater where a few orcs were taking cover and taking potshots at their position. Aelius returned to the present. His superhuman enhancements had staunched the bleeding, and, for now at least, he could press on. As he continued deeper into the hulk, the corridors became increasingly distorted, in the same way that a cloth might be twisted and wrung to squeeze out every last drop of water. All around him, the bulkheads groaned under stress. It was like the ship itself was letting out a final, deathly moan. Eventually, Aelius entered a large circular chamber. There was no floor. Instead, the ground vanished into a yawning, seemingly bottomless chasm. A single gantry extended like a precious lifeline across the void to a doorway on the other side. But it had been damaged with a large section missing in the center. Aelius made his way over and assessed the damage. There was evidence of explosives, most likely a cracked grenade. The locator rune flared again on his display, but this time it persisted. The signal was strong and not too far away. He assessed his options. The gap was wide. Too wide for a regular human to jump across, but not so for one of the Emperor's chosen. He backed up and, with a running start, ran and threw himself across the gap. But the moment his feet left the floor, a long tentacle suddenly whipped out to wrap itself around his leg. It pulled and sent him crashing back down onto the gantry with bone-jarring force. Reflexively, he struck down with his combat knife, cutting his foot free, the amputated tentacle wriggling off the gantry and trailing ichor as it fell. Aelius brought up his bolter and began to fire, the resounding crack of bolter rounds filling the chamber, amplified to deafening levels by its drum-like shape. The alien thing that had attacked him was a grotesque blob of thick muscle and chitin armor, at least 5 times his size, supported by 4 stocky legs. Where you'd expect a head to be was instead a mass of tentacles that ended in sharp, vicious-looking hook-like sickles. Its murderous appendages flailing wildly, it charged right towards him, its massive bulk causing the gantry to pitch and sway with each thunderous step. At the last moment, with a burst of speed and uncanny agility, Aelius dove forward, sliding beneath the oncoming beast. The creature, too massive and unwieldy to halt its charge, careened forward, its bulk carrying it over the edge. It plummeted into the abyss below to join its lost severed tentacle in oblivion. Before Aelius could attract more unwanted attention, he quickly ran to leap across again. With his enhanced strength, he launched himself into the air, his powerful legs propelling him over to the other side. He landed with a roll and made his way through the door. It led to a series of short corridors, and in one, with a heavy heart, he found the origin of the beacon. Slumped at the center of a score of slaughtered Xenos lay Tiberius. His battle-scarred armor was a testament to his unyielding courage, his chainsword still held firmly in his hands. Aelius kicked away the gene stealers and lesser tyrannid forms that surrounded his fallen brother, taking stock of the number of the slain. Tiberius had acquitted himself well. He had done his duty, and he had sold his life dearly, fighting to the last against the Emperor's enemies. Aelius knelt beside his friend, his hand gently resting on Tiberius's shoulder. "Better late than never, brother," he said, but there was no humor in his voice this time. With a heavy heart, Aelius gently laid Tiberius down on the cold, unfeeling floor and carefully retrieved the tools Apothecary Thorn had entrusted to him for this most solemn task. It was a duty that carried the weight of honor and was perhaps the most important task that one Astartes can perform for another. He reverently unsealed the ceramite chest plate, placing it to one side. Then he cut into his friend, revealing the darkened cerulean organ known as the progenoid gland, a profound sense of loss settling upon him. The progenoid gland, the sacred vessel of gene seed, was the essence of a space marine's legacy and power. He used the specially crafted implements to extract the gland from Tiberius's body. Each movement was a tribute to the battles they had fought side by side, the shared triumphs and the burdens they had carried. Burdens that were Tiberius's no more. As he held the harvested gene seed, Aelius was thankful. Tiberius's legacy would live on, being passed down to new recruits who would be implanted to become Astartes. His sullen task complete, Aelius secured the tools and precious gene seed before rising to his feet. He didn't want to leave Tiberius's body like this, and he wished he could stay longer. He wanted to honor his friend in some more fitting way, but duty called, as it always did. He retrieved Tiberius's blood-soaked chainsword and readied to return back to the Thunderhawk. Lastly, he removed his helmet, allowing the cool air to touch his face, and met Tiberius's lifeless eyes one last time. "Your duty is ended," Aelius spoke. "In the Emperor's name, rest, until the stars reunite our paths. Farewell, my brother, my friend."